Sophia Turner's world was supposed to be perfect. At 29, she had everything she thought a woman could ask for. A successful husband, a beautiful home in Manhattan, and a baby growing inside her. She rubbed her belly every morning with hope, whispering promises of lullabies and bedtime stories. But as she looked out from the tall glass windows of her apartment, she felt an unshakable emptiness. Her husband, Richard, was never really there. And when he was, his eyes carried a coldness she couldn't explain. The truth, though still hidden, was far darker than anything Sophia's gentle heart could imagine. Richard wasn't thinking of cribs or nursery paint. He wasn't thinking about his wife's safety. He was calculating, coldly, ruthlessly, how much her life insurance policy would give him if she were gone. His mistress, Clara Evans, whispered poison into his ear every night, urging him to finish what he had started. Sophia tried to push the thoughts away. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe Richard's distance was just the stress of business. She wanted to believe that the man she married was still somewhere inside him, that the vows they shared on their wedding day still meant something. But the way he avoided her touch, the way he lingered on his phone late at night, it gnawed at her. Then came the suggestion that changed everything. Richard invited her on a weekend getaway, insisting they deserved time away from the city. "Just you, me, and the baby," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He mentioned a private plane, chartered especially for her comfort. Sophia hesitated, but his sudden burst of charm melted her doubts. For once, she thought, maybe he was trying to reconnect. Maybe this was a chance to save their marriage. She didn't know the trip was designed to end her life. The night before the flight, she packed carefully, maternity clothes, a photo of her parents, and the little ultrasound picture she carried everywhere. She touched her stomach, speaking softly. "We're going on an adventure, sweetheart. Daddy says it will be beautiful." Her words trembled with both excitement and fear. But fate has a way of speaking, even in whispers. On the way to the airport, Sophia's phone buzzed with a strange message from an unknown number. "Don't get on that plane." Her heart skipped. She stared at the screen, confused, but Richard's sharp glance from the driver's seat made her shove the phone back into her purse. She told herself it was probably a mistake. Still, the words stayed with her. The runway lights glowed in the distance. The private jet shimmered under the night sky, waiting to swallow her whole. Richard reached for her hand, forcing a smile. "Trust me," he said. Sophia wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe love was still alive. But as she stepped toward the plane, her baby shifted inside her, almost as if warning her of the storm about to come. And in that chilling moment, Sophia had no idea the plane she was boarding was meant to be her coffin. On the surface, Sophia Turner lived the kind of life other women envied. Her Instagram showed photos of candlelit dinners, expensive vacations, and a glittering diamond ring that Richard had slipped onto her finger 5 years earlier. Their Manhattan penthouse had marble floors and a balcony with a skyline view. Strangers thought she had it all. But behind closed doors, Sophia's life was lonelier than anyone could guess. Richard had once been her dream. He was charming, ambitious, the kind of man who made promises with conviction. When Sophia first met him, she believed she'd found her forever. He told her he adored her smile, admired her kindness, and wanted to build a family together. For a time, she believed in that vision. She believed he loved her. But marriage has a way of peeling back layers. Slowly, Richard grew colder. The kisses on her forehead stopped. The late-night talks faded. He became consumed with money, status, and business deals. Sophia, meanwhile, clung to the hope that having a baby would bring them back together. She imagined Richard cradling their child, softening in ways she hadn't seen in years. Instead, her pregnancy only seemed to push him further away. When she told him the news, she expected joy. Instead, Richard's smile had been strained, almost forced. "That's great," he said, quickly changing the subject to a deal he was closing. Sophia brushed it off, convincing herself he was just overwhelmed. Her days were quiet, filled with small routines. She taught part-time at a nearby elementary school until her belly began to show. She decorated the nursery in gentle yellows and whites. She placed a rocking chair by the window, already picturing the baby wrapped in a soft blanket, listening to lullabies. But her nights were restless. Richard often came home late, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. He kept his phone face down, jumped at every notification, and locked his office door. Once, while folding his laundry, Sophia found a lipstick-stained handkerchief in his jacket pocket. Her heart pounded, but she told herself it wasn't what it looked like. Love makes excuses. Love chooses blindness. Her best friend, Laura, noticed her fading glow. "Sophia, are you sure you're okay?" Laura asked gently over coffee. "You've lost weight, and you look so tired." Sophia forced a smile. "It's just pregnancy. I'll be fine." She didn't dare admit the truth out loud. Still, deep inside, something gnawed at her. The man she once trusted felt like a stranger. Yet she held on because of the baby, because she wanted her child to have a father, because she believed in vows, even when they felt broken. Sophia prayed every night, pressing her hands over her belly. "Please, God, keep us safe. Let Richard remember who he used to be." She clung to faith the way a drowning woman clings to driftwood. What she didn't know was that in another part of the city, Richard was whispering sweet lies to Clara Evans, and together they were plotting a plan so cruel it would shatter her fragile world forever. And while Sophia prepared a nursery for her child, Richard and Clara were preparing her funeral. Richard Turner sat in the corner booth of an upscale lounge, the kind of place where low lighting and expensive wine kept secrets safe. Across from him, Clara Evans leaned forward, her manicured fingers wrapped around a crystal glass. She was beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way. Dark red lipstick, silk blouse that clung to her like armor, and eyes filled with ambition. Clara wasn't a woman who settled for scraps. She wanted everything, and she wanted it now. "You've dragged this out long enough," she hissed, keeping her voice low but firm. "You said she wouldn't be a problem by now. Yet Sophia is still alive, still carrying that baby, still standing in the way of us." Richard rubbed his temples, his jaw clenched. "It's not that simple. She's suspicious. If I make the wrong move, everything collapses." Clara leaned closer, her tone icy. "Listen to me, Richard. As long as she's breathing, she owns half of everything you've built. And don't forget, she's pregnant. Once that baby comes, your little empire won't just belong to you. It will belong to her and the child. Do you really want to be trapped forever?" The words sliced through him. Richard had spent years climbing ladders, building businesses, charming investors, but behind the glamour, his empire was crumbling. Bad deals, hidden debts, and reckless spending had eaten through his wealth. The only thing keeping him afloat was the safety net Sophia represented. She had a hefty life insurance policy, one that he had quietly doubled months earlier. Clara reached into her purse and slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "I know a pilot. Discreet. He'll take a payout, no questions asked. A private flight, a mechanical failure. The wreckage will look like an accident. Clean. Final. No one will ever suspect a thing." Richard stared at the paper, his pulse quickening. He could feel the walls of his financial ruin pressing in. The thought of being free from Sophia, free from the weight of her innocence, was tempting in a way that chilled even him. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered, though his tone lacked conviction. Clara's lips curved into a cold smile. "I've never been more sure of anything. Do you want to spend the rest of your life chained to a woman you don't love, or do you want to build a future with me? A real future. Power, money, freedom." Richard took a long sip of his drink, the burn in his throat matching the fire building inside him. He thought of Sophia's gentle eyes, her soft hands cradling her stomach. For a fleeting second, guilt pricked him, but greed was stronger. Desire was stronger. Clara was stronger. Finally, he folded the paper and slipped it into his jacket pocket. His decision was made. Clara leaned back, victorious, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Good. Then let's make sure Sophia Turner never comes back from that flight." And while Sophia dreamed of saving her marriage, her husband and his mistress were already planning her death in chilling detail. Sophia Turner tried to silence the storm in her chest, but the unease kept clawing at her. Every time Richard left the apartment late at night, she told herself it was for business. Every time he came home with a faint trace of perfume that wasn't hers, she told herself it was her imagination. Every time his phone buzzed and he quickly turned the screen away, she swallowed her questions. Love has a way of making excuses, and Sophia wanted so badly to believe her marriage wasn't falling apart. Still, her instincts whispered otherwise. She noticed how Richard avoided her eyes when she spoke about the baby. He used to ask about the nursery, about names, about tiny shoes they could buy together. Now he brushed past every mention of the future, as if the idea of fatherhood was a chain around his neck. One evening, as she folded baby clothes she had bought with her own savings, she overheard Richard on the phone in his office. The door wasn't fully shut, and his voice carried through the crack. "Don't worry," he said in a low tone. "Everything will be handled. After this trip, there won't be any more problems." Sophia froze, a onesie clutched tightly in her hands. Handled. The word felt heavy, sinister. She wanted to believe he was talking about a business deal, but something in his voice chilled her. When she stepped into the room moments later, Richard quickly ended the call and forced a smile. "Just work," he muttered, brushing her off. Sophia tried to confide in her best friend Laura during a walk in the park. "I don't know, Laura. Something feels wrong," she whispered. Laura squeezed her hand. "You're carrying his child, Sophia. Maybe you're just more sensitive right now. Hormones, stress. Don't jump to conclusions." Sophia nodded, but the doubt gnawed at her bones. That night she prayed harder than ever. "God, please protect me and this child. Show me if I'm wrong. Help me see the truth." The very next morning, Richard surprised her with breakfast in bed. He kissed her cheek the way he used to years ago. "I booked us a weekend trip," he said cheerfully. "A private getaway. Just us. No phones, no work. You deserve this, Soph. We deserve this." Sophia blinked, startled by his sudden sweetness. For a moment, her heart softened. Maybe Laura was right. Maybe she had been imagining everything. Maybe Richard was finally remembering how to be her husband again. She wanted desperately to believe it. But later that day, as she placed her suitcase on the bed and began packing, she found an airline confirmation slip in Richard's jacket pocket. The date matched the weekend. The name on the booking, however, was not hers. It was Clara Evans. Her blood ran cold. She stood frozen in the bedroom, the hum of the city outside her window suddenly deafening. Richard walked in moments later, smiling too wide. "Ready for our adventure?" he asked. Sophia forced a smile, slipping the slip of paper behind her back. Her heart raced. And in that moment, she realized she wasn't imagining the danger. She was living inside it. The morning of the trip, Sophia sat on the edge of their bed, suitcase neatly packed at her feet. Her hands trembled as she smoothed the fabric of her maternity dress, trying to calm her nerves. The airline confirmation slip she had discovered, Clara Evans's name printed in bold letters, still burned in her memory. Every fiber of her being told her not to go. And yet the sight of Richard moving confidently through the apartment, humming to himself as if nothing were wrong, trapped her in silence. "Are you ready, Soph?" Richard asked, stepping into the bedroom. His tone was warm, almost too warm. He leaned down, kissing her forehead as though he hadn't been cold for months. "This weekend is going to change everything. I promise." Sophia forced a smile. "Change? Everything?" she echoed softly. Richard nodded. "A fresh start. You, me, and the baby. No stress, no distractions." His hand brushed against her stomach, but the touch felt rehearsed, calculated. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to pull the slip of paper from her pocket and demand an explanation. But when his eyes locked onto hers, she saw something that froze her tongue. Not love, not even guilt, but determination. He had made up his mind about something, and Sophia feared it wasn't what he was saying out loud. The car ride to the private airstrip was unnervingly quiet. Richard's hand rested on the steering wheel, while his other tapped a rhythm on his knee. Sophia stared out the window, watching the city blur into suburbs, then into open fields. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She glanced down. Another anonymous text lit up the screen. "Don't get on the plane. Your life depends on it." Her throat tightened. Who was sending these messages? How did they know? She turned slightly, but Richard's sharp profile and rigid jaw made her hide the phone quickly. She swallowed hard, slipping it back into her bag before he noticed. When they reached the airstrip, a small private jet gleamed under the sun, its polished metal reflecting the clear blue sky. The pilot, a man with weary eyes, greeted Richard with a handshake that lasted a second too long, as if something unspoken passed between them. Sophia caught the glance but kept silent. "This is it," Richard said, placing a hand on her back, guiding her forward. "You'll love the view from above." Sophia hesitated at the foot of the stairs leading up to the jet. Her stomach tightened, the baby shifting as though sensing her fear. She pressed her hand against her belly, whispering silently, "Stay strong, little one. Mama's here." Richard noticed her pause. His smile stiffened. "Sophia, trust me. Everything's going to be fine. You're safe with me." Safe. The word rattled inside her head like a cruel joke. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to grab her bag and escape before the engines roared to life. But Richard's presence loomed over her, his charm a cage she couldn't break. With trembling legs, she climbed the steps and entered the cabin, the door closing behind her with a heavy thud. And as the engines roared to life, Sophia realized she might have just walked into a trap she would never return from. The cabin of the private jet smelled faintly of leather and jet fuel. The seats were plush, the windows spotless, the champagne chilled. To anyone else, it might have seemed like luxury. To Sophia Turner, it felt like a prison in the clouds. She sat with her hands clasped over her belly, her knuckles pale, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Richard settled into the seat opposite her, his expression calm, even cheerful. He poured himself a glass of champagne, the bubbles rising in a soft fizz. "To us," he said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings." Sophia forced a nod, her lips barely moving into a smile. She wanted to taste hope in his words, but her stomach churned with dread. The anonymous text still haunted her. "Don't get on the plane." And yet here she was, trapped thousands of feet above the ground with no escape. The engines hummed louder as the plane lifted into the sky. Sophia's ears popped, and she glanced at the pilot through the cockpit door. His shoulders were tense, his hands stiff on the controls. He avoided her eyes when she looked his way. It was subtle, but enough to make her suspicion deepen. As the city skyline faded beneath them, clouds swallowed the windows. Turbulence rattled the cabin, and Sophia clutched the armrest, whispering a prayer under her breath. Richard chuckled, sipping his champagne. "Relax, Soph. Private flights always feel a little rougher. You'll get used to it." His calmness unnerved her. She studied him closely, searching for the man she had once loved. But instead of warmth, she saw a flicker of calculation behind his eyes. It wasn't the look of a husband protecting his wife. It was the look of a man waiting for something. Suddenly, the pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "We're approaching a patch of heavy weather. Please fasten your seatbelts." Sophia's grip tightened. She leaned toward Richard. "Why didn't we wait for a better day? Why risk flying now?" Richard shrugged casually. "Time waits for no one. Trust me, this is nothing." His words didn't soothe her. Instead, she felt the air in the cabin grow heavier, pressing down on her chest. She thought of the nursery she had prepared, the tiny clothes neatly folded, the rocking chair by the window. She thought of the ultrasound photo tucked safely in her purse. She thought of her unborn child, and fear wrapped around her heart like a vice. Another jolt shook the plane violently, sending Richard's champagne sloshing onto the carpet. He cursed under his breath, wiping it away with a napkin. The pilot's strained voice came again. "Minor turbulence. Stay calm." But Sophia could hear something in his tone, panic he was trying to hide. Her pulse quickened. She glanced at Richard. He didn't look worried. In fact, his lips curled into something that looked chillingly close to satisfaction. The cabin lights flickered. The engines roared louder. The turbulence grew sharper, tossing the plane like a toy in the sky. Sophia clutched her stomach, whispering to her baby, "Hold on. Please hold on." And then, with a deafening crack, the jet lurched downward, as if the sky itself had decided it was time to claim them. The scream of the engines drowned out everything. Sophia's body slammed against the seatbelt as the jet pitched violently downward. Her ears rang with the roar of wind and the rattling of metal. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling, swinging wildly, but her hands shook too hard to pull one down. All she could do was hold on to her belly, whispering frantic prayers. Richard sat rigid across from her, gripping the armrests. His face was pale, but his eyes flickered with something strange, anticipation, not fear. The sight twisted Sophia's gut. He knew this was coming. The plane plunged through storm clouds, lightning flashing outside the windows. Passengers screamed. A businessman clutched his briefcase as if it could save him. A young woman sobbed into her hands, praying for her children at home. The pilot shouted over the intercom, his voice cracking, "Brace for impact! Brace for impact!" Sophia's vision blurred with tears. The baby kicked inside her, a sharp reminder of the life she carried. She wrapped her arms around her stomach, trying to shield it with her body. Please God, not my baby, please. Then came the moment of impact. The jet tore through the treetops, metal shrieking against wood. The cabin shook with unbearable force, luggage hurtling through the air. A piece of paneling ripped loose, striking Sophia across the shoulder. Pain exploded through her body, but she clung to consciousness. The ground rushed up like a fist. The plane slammed into the forest floor, erupting into chaos. Seats ripped from their bolts, windows shattered. Flames roared through the cabin as fuel spilled like liquid fire. The world around Sophia became a furnace. Her ears rang with screams, agonized, desperate, fading one by one. She tried to move, but her legs were trapped under twisted metal. Her skin seared from the heat. The smell of burning fabric and flesh choked her lungs. She coughed, gagging, her throat raw from smoke. Through the haze, she saw Richard unbuckle himself. His movements were quick, calculated. He didn't look back at her. He didn't even hesitate. He pushed past a dying passenger, grabbed the emergency hatch, and disappeared into the flames. Sophia's heart shattered. Her husband hadn't tried to save her. He had left her to die. Summoning strength she didn't know she had, she clawed at the wreckage, pinning her down. Metal cut into her palms, her skin blistering from the fire. Every breath was agony, but she refused to stop. Her baby's life depended on it. Inch by inch, she dragged herself free, crawling through smoke and ashes. A beam collapsed behind her with a thunderous crash, sparks flying. The fire grew hotter, chasing her like a monster determined to consume her. Her hair singed, her dress burned away, her skin blistered black. Still, she crawled, leaving streaks of blood and ash on the ground. Finally, gasping, she pulled herself out through a jagged tear in the fuselage. Cold night air hit her face, mixing with smoke. She collapsed onto the snowy earth, coughing, her body trembling violently. But as she tried to take her first breath of freedom, a low growl echoed in the darkness. Something alive was watching her crawl out of the flames. Snow clung to Sophia's blistered skin as she gasped for breath. Her body was broken, her face scorched, her lungs burning with smoke. Every movement felt impossible, yet the will to survive pushed her forward. She had just escaped fire and death, but the night was not finished testing her. From the tree line, a sound cut through the crackle of flames behind her. A growl. Low, deep, hungry. Sophia froze, her heart hammering painfully. Slowly her eyes adjusted to the darkness. There, emerging from the shadows, was a wild dog, mangy, ribs visible, teeth bared. Its eyes glowed yellow in the firelight, locked on her trembling form. Her breath caught. She tried to move, but her legs buckled beneath her. She collapsed back into the snow, her hands clawing at the ground. The dog stepped closer, saliva dripping from its mouth. It circled her slowly, savoring her weakness. Sophia raised a trembling arm, trying to shield her face. "Please, no," she whispered, though she knew the animal couldn't understand mercy. The beast lunged. Its weight crashed onto her chest, hot breath flooding her burned skin. Teeth snapped dangerously close to her neck. Sophia screamed, thrashing weakly, her raw hands pressing against its fur. But she was no match for the animal's strength. Its claws raked her arm, and blood stained the snow beneath them. Her baby. Her baby. That was all she could think. She couldn't die here. Not like this. Not after surviving the flames. With the last of her strength, she grabbed a sharp shard of wreckage near her side and slashed blindly. The dog yelped, pulling back slightly, but the attack only enraged it further. It bared its teeth, ready to finish her. Sophia's vision blurred. The world spun. She whispered a prayer, preparing for the end. Then a gunshot shattered the night. The crack echoed through the forest, louder than thunder. The wild dog yelped in terror and bolted into the trees, vanishing into the darkness. Sophia lay stunned, her body trembling uncontrollably. Footsteps crunched over the snow, fast and deliberate. A tall figure emerged from the smoke and fire's glow. He wore a heavy coat, a rifle slung in his hands, and determination etched across his face. His eyes locked onto Sophia. "My God," he muttered, rushing toward her. He knelt at her side, pulling off his gloves to check her pulse. "You're alive. You're actually alive." Sophia tried to speak, but only a weak rasp escaped her lips. Her vision flickered, darkness pulling at the edges. "Stay with me," the man commanded firmly, His voice carried authority, the kind that refused to let her slip away. He pulled a canteen from his pack, dribbling water carefully into her cracked lips. "You're safe now. I won't let you die here." She blinked, barely able to focus. His face was strong, determined, unfamiliar. Whoever he was, he had come at the last possible moment, her final thread of hope. As he lifted her gently into his arms, Sophia let go of the fight to stay awake. The world faded, but his voice anchored her in the darkness. And when she awoke again, she would discover her savior was not just any man, but a billionaire whose power could change her fate forever. The first thing Sophia felt was pain. It wasn't sharp like a cut, but endless, burning like her body was still trapped inside the flames. She tried to move, but her limbs felt heavy, restrained. A faint beeping sound echoed in her ears, followed by muffled voices. "Her vitals are holding steady," a woman's voice said. "She's strong, but the burns are extensive." Sophia forced her eyes open. Harsh white light flooded her vision, and the sterile smell of antiseptic filled her lungs. She was in a hospital. Bandages wrapped her arms, chest, and face. Tubes ran from her body to machines she didn't recognize. A tall man stood at her bedside. It was him, the stranger who had saved her from the wild dog. His coat was gone, replaced by a tailored suit. His presence filled the room, commanding yet gentle. "You're awake," he said softly. "Thank God." Sophia tried to speak, but her throat burned. The man quickly poured water into a cup and helped her sip. "Don't push yourself," he cautioned. "You've been through hell. My name is Liam Archer. I found you near the crash site. You're safe now." Safe. The word echoed in her mind, but it felt fragile. Memories of fire, screams, and Richard's cold eyes surged back. Tears leaked from the corners of her swollen eyes. She wanted to ask about the others, about her baby, but the words stuck in her throat. Dr. Mei Chen, a burn specialist, entered the room with a clipboard. Her expression was kind, but heavy. She pulled up a chair beside Sophia's bed. "Mrs. Turner, I need to be honest with you. You sustained third-degree burns over much of your body. It will take months, years of surgeries and therapy to recover. We can help, but you will never look the same again." Sophia's lips trembled beneath the bandages. Her reflection, her identity, gone? She closed her eyes, a sob shaking through her chest. But worse was still to come. Dr. Chen hesitated, her voice lowering. "And, I'm sorry, the trauma from the crash was too much for your pregnancy. You lost the baby." The words crashed over Sophia like a wave of ice. Her heart shattered into pieces. The one reason she had fought to survive, the one life she had begged God to protect, gone. She let out a broken cry, muffled by the oxygen mask. Her hands clutched at her belly, empty now, hollow in every way. Liam placed a hand gently on her shoulder. His voice was steady, but full of compassion. "I know nothing can replace what you've lost, but you are alive. And as long as you're alive, you still have a chance to fight, for yourself, for your future. Don't give up." Sophia sobbed until exhaustion silenced her. In the haze of pain and grief, one thought burned in her mind. Richard had left her to die. He had walked away from her and their child. And while she had lost everything, he was still free. And in that moment of despair, Sophia swore she would one day rise again, not only to reclaim her life, but to make Richard pay for his betrayal. Across town, far from the hospital where Sophia lay broken, Richard Turner clinked a glass of champagne against Clara Evans's. The penthouse lights glowed warm, music played softly in the background, and an expensive dinner spread across the table. To anyone looking in, it was a scene of romance. To Richard and Clara, it was a celebration of murder. "To us," Richard said, smirking as he raised his glass, "to finally being free." Clara's lips curled into a victorious smile. Free from her, free from the baggage, and free to start the life we deserve. She leaned over, kissing him slowly, her lipstick staining his mouth. Richard laughed, the sound cold and hollow. He had been tense for weeks, terrified the plan might fail. But the reports were clear. The private jet had gone down in the Montana wilderness. The fire was so intense that authorities said identifying remains would take time, if they were found at all. For Richard, that was perfect. A body meant questions. Ashes meant closure. Still, Clara pressed him. "And the insurance?" Richard leaned back, smug. "Already in motion. $10 million. It's only a matter of weeks before it's wired. Then we're untouchable." Clara's eyes glittered like jewels. "Imagine it. No debts, no hiding. Just us. Power, money, Everything we've ever wanted." Richard poured another glass, but for a brief moment his smile faltered. A flash of Sophia's face crossed his mind, the way she had looked at him, trusting, even as she stepped onto that plane. Guilt pricked at him, but he drowned it quickly with another drink. "She's gone," he muttered to himself. "She's gone, and this is the life I deserve." But not everyone was convinced. Detective Omar Reyes, a seasoned investigator with a sharp eye for detail, sat in his office late that night, reviewing the crash reports. Something didn't add up. The weather conditions were bad, yes, but the flight path was unusual. Why had the pilot chosen such a dangerous route when safer options were available? And why had Richard taken out a massive increase on his wife's life insurance policy only months before the crash? Reyes tapped his pen against the file, leaning back in his chair. He'd seen too many cases of accidental deaths tied to greedy spouses. His gut told him Richard Turner wasn't grieving at all. He was celebrating. At the same time, Clara was careless. She texted Richard often, reminding him not to slip up when speaking to the insurance adjuster. One message, intercepted by cell tower logs, hinted at a deeper conspiracy. Reyes flagged it, adding it to his growing pile of suspicions. Meanwhile, in the penthouse, Clara curled against Richard's chest, whispering, "We're unstoppable now. No one can touch us." Richard stroked her hair, his lips curving into a cruel smile. "Sophia's gone. The world thinks she's ashes in a forest. There's nothing left to fear." But neither of them knew that Sophia was alive, and soon the secret they thought was buried in flames would come back to haunt them. Sophia Turner barely recognized the woman staring back at her from the hospital mirror. Her reflection was wrapped in gauze, only fragments of her scorched skin visible. The bandages made her look less like a person and more like a ghost haunting her own body. She touched her cheek with trembling fingers, recoiling at the rough, alien texture beneath the wrappings. Dr. Mai Chen stood nearby, her tone calm but steady. "Sophia, we've stabilized you. You're healing, but the burns are deep. You will need multiple surgeries, skin grafts, reconstruction. This won't be weeks or months, it will be years of work." Sophia's throat tightened. Years? She couldn't imagine living like this, trapped in pain, unable to recognize herself. And yet, what choice did she have? She had survived the fire only to face a different kind of prison. Liam Archer entered the room quietly, his presence filling the sterile space with warmth. His suit was immaculate, but his expression was heavy with concern. "You've been given a second chance," he said gently. "It doesn't erase what you've lost, but it means you still have a future, and I want to help you rebuild it." Sophia blinked at him through tears. "Why?" she rasped, her voice weak. "You don't even know me." Liam crouched beside her bed, his eyes level with hers. "Because I've seen what cruelty does to people. My mother was a victim once. No one saved her. I couldn't change her fate, but I can change yours." The sincerity in his voice broke something inside her. For the first time since the crash, she felt a flicker of safety. But then came the question she had been avoiding. "What if Richard finds out I'm alive?" she whispered. "What if he tries again?" Liam's jaw tightened. "Then we make sure he never knows. I have resources. Doctors, legal teams, protection. We can give you a new identity, a new face. Sophia Turner can vanish. You can become someone he'll never recognize." The thought terrified her, leaving behind everything she had ever been. Her name, her history, even her face. It felt like another death. Yet part of her knew it might be the only way forward. Richard had already proven he was willing to sacrifice her for money. He wouldn't hesitate to finish the job if he discovered she was alive. That night, as the machines beeped steadily beside her bed, Sophia stared at the ceiling, replaying Richard's betrayal in her mind. His cold eyes, his calmness on the plane, his choice to leave her burning in the wreckage. He hadn't lost a wife, he had discarded her like trash. And suddenly she realized something. Maybe letting Sophia Turner die wasn't just survival. Maybe it was freedom. With trembling resolve, she whispered into the dark room, "Then let her die. Let Sophia die. I'll come back, but not as her." And in that moment, a new woman was born, one who would rise from the ashes with a face no one could recognize, not even the man who tried to kill her. The operating room lights felt like stars blazing above Sophia. She lay on the table, her body trembling beneath the sterile sheets as Dr. Mei Chen prepared the first of many surgeries. We'll start with skin grafts, Dr. Chen explained gently. Step by step, we'll rebuild what the fire tried to steal from you. This will be painful, but you're strong. Sophia closed her eyes, hearing those words echo inside her. The fire tried to steal you. It had almost succeeded. It had taken her child, her identity, and her old life. Now she was about to let the last piece of Sophia Turner disappear too. The hours blurred into a haze of anesthesia, scalpels, and stitches. When she awoke, her body screamed with pain. Her face was wrapped again, thicker this time, like a cocoon hiding what was beneath. Liam was there, sitting faithfully by her bedside, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. You made it through the first one, he whispered, squeezing her hand. Every surgery is a step forward. Weeks turned into months. Skin grafts covered the burns on her arms and chest. Reconstructive work reshaped her face, little by little, like a sculptor chiseling stone. Each time the bandages came off, Sophia flinched. She no longer saw the woman she once was. Instead, a stranger stared back at her from the mirror, raw, unfamiliar, unfinished. One night after her third surgery, she broke down completely. Hannah Brooks, the hospital's trauma counselor, found her huddled on the bathroom floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I don't know who I am anymore, Sophia cried. When I look in the mirror, I don't see me. I don't see my child. I see nothing. Hannah knelt beside her, voice gentle but firm. You're not nothing. You're alive. You're still here. And sometimes survival means becoming someone new. That doesn't erase who you were. It means you carry her inside you, even if the world can't see her face anymore. Those words lingered. Sophia began to write in a journal Liam gave her, scribbling late into the night. She wrote letters to her baby, promises to the woman she once was, and vows to the stranger she was becoming. Dr. Chen finally asked the question directly. Are you ready to finish this? We can restore your face completely, but it won't be the same as before. It will be a new identity. If you say yes, Sophia Turner will cease to exist in every way. Sophia stared at her reflection, bandaged, swollen, unrecognizable. For a long moment she said nothing. Then slowly she nodded. Do it. Let Sophia die. I'll be whoever I need to be. The final surgery was grueling, but when the bandages came off, a different woman looked back from the mirror. Her features were softer, sharper in places, almost elegant. She looked alive, but no one would mistake her for the woman Richard once married. Liam stood behind her, his gaze steady. From now on, he said quietly, you're Sage Archer. Sophia Turner is gone. Sophia, now Sage, touched her face with trembling fingers. For the first time, she didn't cry. She smiled faintly, though her eyes burned with fire. And deep inside, Sage swore that this new face would not only protect her, but one day confront the man who tried to erase her. Sage Archer stood on the balcony of Liam's estate, the ocean breeze brushing against her face. The waves crashed below, steady and relentless, like the pulse of the earth itself. She inhaled deeply, savoring the salt air. For the first time since the crash, the smell around her wasn't smoke or antiseptic. It was life. Yet every breath reminded her she was no longer Sophia Turner. She had buried that name, buried that face, buried the child she lost. Now she was Sage Archer, a woman the world had never met, and she was still learning what that meant. Liam watched her from the doorway, his expression quiet, thoughtful. How does it feel? He asked. Strange, Sage admitted, brushing her hair back. Like I'm walking around in someone else's skin. You're not, Liam said firmly. This is you. Not the fire, not Richard, not Clara. You. You get to choose who Sage Archer will be. His words comforted her, but the weight of her past still lingered. Every night, nightmares dragged her back into the burning wreckage. She woke drenched in sweat, clutching her stomach, gasping for a baby that wasn't there. Hannah Brooks, the trauma counselor, guided her through those nights, teaching her grounding exercises, reminding her she was safe. But grief has no schedule. It returned in waves, breaking her without warning. During the day, Liam insisted she focus on living again. He introduced her to the staff at the estate, who treated her with kindness and discretion. He encouraged her to take walks through the gardens, to paint, to write. Slowly, Sage found herself drawn to the greenhouse, where rows of orchids bloomed in silence. She spent hours there, tending to them with careful hands, as though nurturing them could heal the emptiness inside her. One afternoon, Liam joined her in the greenhouse. You know, he said, watching her gently water the flowers, My mother used to say orchids are survivors. They can bloom even in the harshest conditions if you give them a little light. Sage smiled faintly. Then maybe I'm an orchid too. You are, Liam said without hesitation, and I'll make sure you always have the light you need. His words stirred something in her. A flicker of warmth she hadn't felt in years. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment she forgot about the fire, the betrayal, the ashes of her old life. But then Richard's face flashed in her mind, cold and triumphant, and the warmth vanished into anger. I can't let him get away with it, Sage whispered, her hands tightening around the watering can. He killed our child, he left me to die, and he's out there celebrating while I hide here. Liam's eyes darkened. Your time will come, but you need to heal first. Build your strength. When the moment is right, you'll face him, and I'll be there when you do. Sage nodded, her jaw set. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving, she was planning. And as the sun set over the estate, Sage realized her rebirth wasn't only about living again. It was about rising strong enough to bring Richard Turner to his knees. Richard Turner sat at his mahogany desk, swirling a glass of whiskey in his hand. The city lights sparkled outside his penthouse window, but the glitter did little to quiet his restless mind. He had everything he thought he wanted. Sophia was gone, the life insurance claim was in motion, and Clara was in his bed every night. And yet, peace refused to come. Clara strolled into the room wearing a silk robe. Her smile sly, she perched herself on the edge of his desk, taking the whiskey glass from his hand for a sip. Why the long face, darling? She teased. We should be celebrating. You're weeks away from $10 million. Our life begins the moment that money hits the account. Richard forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I just don't like the waiting. The insurance company is dragging their feet. They're asking too many questions. Clara rolled her eyes. That's normal. A crash like that, of course they'll be thorough, but they have no reason to suspect us. The fire burned everything. You're in the clear. But Richard wasn't convinced. Detective Omar Reyes had called him earlier that week, asking pointed questions about his relationship with Sophia. Why wasn't he on the plane with her? Why had he taken out a larger insurance policy only months before? Richard had smoothed it over with charm, but the detective's sharp tone lingered in his mind. Meanwhile, Clara was beginning to show her true colors. She spent his money carelessly, buying jewelry, designer clothes, and expensive wines. She flaunted their relationship openly, no longer hiding the affair. Richard admired her boldness once, but now it grated on him. Every reckless purchase, every smug smile felt like a risk. One night, as they dined at an upscale restaurant, Clara leaned across the table, her voice dripping with impatience. When the money comes, we're moving to Europe. Paris, maybe, or Rome. Somewhere glamorous, somewhere no one remembers Sophia Turner. Richard's jaw tightened. And what about the businesses I built here? My name means something in this city. Clara smirked. Your name means debt. Don't pretend you're some untouchable mogul. Without that payout, you're broke, and I'm not about to spend my life cleaning up your messes. Her words cut deep. For a moment, Richard saw Clara clearly, not as a partner, but as a predator. She wasn't with him for love. She was with him for money, power, and the thrill of winning. And if the money didn't come fast enough, he had no doubt she would turn on him. That night, Richard lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Clara slept peacefully beside him. The image of Sophia's face, burning, terrified, haunted him. Guilt gnawed at him, but so did fear. Detective Reyes wasn't going away. Clara wasn't going to stay loyal. His empire was built on ashes, and he was beginning to realize ashes don't last. And while Richard's paranoia grew, he had no idea that the woman he thought he buried in flames was alive and preparing to return with a vengeance. Detective Omar Reyes leaned back in his worn leather chair, staring at the cluttered bulletin board in front of him. Photographs of the crash site, maps of the flight path, and financial records from Richard Turner's companies were pinned in a chaotic mosaic. A string of red thread connected the pieces: weather reports, life insurance policies, and most recently, text message logs pulled from a subpoena. To anyone else, it looked like coincidence. But Reyes had been on the force long enough to know that coincidences usually pointed to the truth. And his gut told him Richard Turner wasn't a grieving husband. He was a man hiding something. Reyes picked up the crash report again. The jet's chosen route through Montana's stormy mountains made no sense. There had been a safer path, clearer skies, but the pilot had deliberately chosen the most dangerous option. Why? And then there was the matter of money. Richard had doubled Sophia's life insurance just months before the crash. That alone set off alarm bells. "Looks like you were too clever, Turner," Reyes muttered under his breath, "but not clever enough." He pulled up the phone logs between Richard and Clara Evans. Most were innocuous, short exchanges about dinner plans or meetings. But buried in the data, one text from Clara stood out. "Make sure you stick to the story. No slip-ups. We can't afford anyone asking questions." Reyes circled it in red ink. To a jury, it wasn't a smoking gun, but to him, it was confirmation that this wasn't just bad weather and bad luck. It was murder disguised as tragedy. Still, something else gnawed at him. Survivors. The crash had been brutal, the fire consuming. Officially, all passengers were presumed dead. But the recovery teams reported inconsistencies. Ashes where bodies should have been, partial remains that didn't match the full manifest. Reyes tapped the file thoughtfully. What if someone lived? He picked up the phone and called Tomasz Nowak, a ranger who had been one of the first at the crash site. "Tomasz, it's Reyes. I need you to tell me again exactly what you saw." The ranger hesitated before speaking. "It was chaos, Detective. Fire everywhere." But he paused. "I found drag marks in the snow, like someone crawled out. There was blood, too. Not much, but enough to say they moved after the crash. I told the recovery team, but they wrote it off. Said animals must have scattered the remains." Reyes sat up straighter, adrenaline sparking in his veins. "Animals don't crawl. People do. Someone got out of that wreckage." Tomas exhaled heavily. "If they did, Detective, then either they're dead somewhere else in those woods, or they're alive and hiding." Reyes ended the call, his mind racing. If Sophia Turner was alive, she wasn't just a victim. She was the key to exposing Richard and Clara. But if Richard discovered she had survived, he'd stop at nothing to finish what he started. And so Detective Reyes made a decision. He would find Sophia before Richard did, no matter the cost. Sage Archer woke early each morning to the sound of waves pounding against the cliffs outside Liam's estate. At first, the ocean's roar unsettled her. It reminded her of the crash, the screaming metal, the unstoppable fall. But over time, it became a rhythm, a reminder that the world was still alive, and so was she. She spent her days in physical therapy, pushing her body to move again. Every stretch pulled at scar tissue. Every step burned like fire, but Sage forced herself forward. "You're stronger than this pain," Hannah Brooks repeated during their sessions. Sage clung to those words like a lifeline. Liam visited often, though never in a way that felt intrusive. Sometimes he brought books, sometimes he simply sat quietly while she practiced walking across the therapy room. "Don't look at the ground," he told her one afternoon. "Look forward, always forward." His presence steadied her. Where Richard had once dismissed her, Liam listened. Where Richard had left her to die, Liam had pulled her from the edge. The contrast was impossible to ignore, and it stirred emotions Sage wasn't ready to name. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in hues of gold, Sage and Liam walked slowly through the gardens. Sage leaned on a cane, still weak but determined. The orchids she had nurtured stood tall around them, glowing in the fading light. "You've given them life again?" Liam said softly, nodding toward the blooms. Sage touched one of the petals with trembling fingers. They were never dead, they just needed care. He looked at her then, his gaze steady. "So did you." Her breath caught. For a moment she allowed herself to meet his eyes fully, to feel the warmth there. She almost smiled. But then, like a shadow, Richard's face flashed in her mind. The cold betrayal, the way he had left her burning. Anger surged through her veins. "I can't stop seeing him," Sage admitted, her voice trembling. "Every time I close my eyes, I see Richard's face. I hear him telling me everything's fine while planning my death. I feel the flames. I lost my child because of him. How do I move past that?" Liam's expression hardened. "You don't move past it, you face it. One day, Sage, you will look him in the eyes again. Not as the woman he tried to kill, but as the woman who survived him. And that will be his punishment before the law takes the rest." Sage felt something ignite inside her. A mix of grief and rage, but also determination. For weeks she had been focused on survival. Now, for the first time, she thought of justice. She thought of fighting back. She tightened her grip on the cane, her voice low but fierce. Then I'll heal. I'll get stronger, and when I stand again, it won't just be for me, it'll be for the child he stole from me. Liam placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. And I'll stand with you. But neither of them knew that Richard's paranoia was growing, and soon his search for loose ends would lead him dangerously close to discovering Sage's secret. Richard Turner sat at the head of his dining table, untouched food growing cold in front of him. Clara Evans twirled pasta on her fork, sipping red wine, but her sharp eyes never left him. "You're quiet tonight," she remarked, her voice edged with irritation. "What's eating you now?" Richard didn't answer at first. He stared out at the city skyline, his reflection in the glass fractured by the lights. Finally, he muttered, "The detective won't let up. Reyes keeps circling back with the same questions. About Sophia, about why I wasn't on that plane, about the insurance." Clara set down her fork with a sigh. "So, you've handled him before. You're charming when you want to be. Smile, play the grieving husband, and soon enough he'll move on." But Richard shook his head. "It's not that simple. He doesn't believe me. I can see it in his eyes. He knows something." Clara's patience snapped. "Then shut him up. Pay him off. Scare him. I don't care what you do. Just make sure he doesn't connect the dots." Richard's jaw tightened. And what if there are no dots to connect? What if? He trailed off, his thoughts darkening. What if she survived? The words hung in the air like a curse. Clara scoffed, but her fingers tightened on the stem of her glass. "Richard, don't be ridiculous. You saw the reports. The fire burned everything. No one could have lived through that." But Richard wasn't convinced. He remembered how resilient Sophia had always been, how stubbornly she held on even when life broke her. He remembered the way she had looked at him on the plane, suspicion in her eyes. He couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, she had found a way out. Clara leaned closer, her tone sharp. "You're letting your guilt mess with your head. Sophia is dead. We're alive. Focus on that." Richard slammed his fist against the table, making the glasses rattle. "You don't understand. If she's alive, she's the one thing that can destroy us. She knows me. She knows everything." Clara stared at him for a moment, her smile fading. For the first time, doubt flickered in her expression. "Then find proof. If she's really gone, prove it. And if she's not—" Her voice dropped, venomous. "Finish it." The room fell into tense silence. Clara's ambition burned hotter than Richard's fear. She wanted the money, the power, the freedom. She didn't care if Richard's conscience was cracking under the weight of what they had done. If anything, his weakness disgusted her. Later that night, Richard sat alone in his office, scrolling through crash site photos leaked to the press. His pulse quickened as he zoomed in on one image. Faint marks in the snow, a trail leading away from the wreckage. He told himself it was animals, but deep down, he knew better. He poured another glass of whiskey, his hands trembling. If Sophia was alive, then she was out there somewhere, waiting. And if she was waiting, she wouldn't be silent forever. And as Richard's fear grew, Detective Reyes was already one step ahead, digging deeper into the crash, closer to uncovering the truth Richard wanted buried. Detective Omar Reyes had been in the business long enough to know when his instincts were right. And with Richard Turner, every fiber of his being screamed that the man was guilty. Still, instinct wasn't enough. He needed evidence. Real evidence. The kind that could hold up in court. He sat in the dim glow of his office lamp, files spread across his desk like puzzle pieces. The insurance policy, the text messages, the flight path. It all pointed in one direction, but he needed the missing link. Proof that Richard and Clara had orchestrated the crash. That proof came from an unexpected place. Reyes received a call from a federal aviation inspector who had been quietly re-examining the wreckage. "Detective, I thought you'd want to hear this," the man said. "The black box didn't survive, but we recovered fragments of the pilot's headset. There's audio distortion, but one line came through clear as day." Reyes leaned forward. "What line?" The inspector cleared his throat. "Don't worry. After this trip, there won't be any more problems. It's faint, but it's there." And detective, it wasn't the pilot's voice. Reyes's eyes narrowed. He knew that voice belonged to Richard Turner. The words matched almost exactly what Richard had been overheard telling someone before the trip. It was enough to connect him to the sabotage. But that wasn't all. Reyes had also subpoenaed Clara Evans's financial records. Buried in her transactions was a large withdrawal 2 days before the crash. Cash, delivered to a private account linked to the co-pilot. It was payment, a bribe for silence. Now the picture was complete. Richard had the motive, money and freedom. Clara had the means, handling the logistics, and together they had blood on their hands. Reyes leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Got you," he whispered. Still, something nagged at him. If Richard and Clara had gone to such lengths to cover their tracks, why did the trail of evidence feel so sloppy? It was almost as if they had believed there would be no need for evidence, no one left to question them. Then he remembered Tomasz Nowak's words about the drag marks in the snow. Someone had escaped. Someone had crawled out of that inferno. If that person was Sophia Turner, she wasn't just a victim. She was the missing witness who could bring this entire case crashing down on Richard and Clara. Reyes picked up the phone and called Nowak again. "Tomasz, I'm flying out to Montana tomorrow. I want you to take me back to that crash site. Show me exactly what you saw." The ranger hesitated. "Detective, that was weeks ago. Snow's covered most of it. If someone made it out, they'd either be dead by now, or they're hiding somewhere far away." Reyes's grip tightened on the phone. "Then I'll find them, alive or dead. I'll find out what really happened out there." And as Reyes prepared to retrace the steps of the woman the world thought was dead, Sage Archer was already regaining her strength, ready to step back into a world that had buried her. Sage Archer sat in the quiet of the greenhouse, her hands resting on the orchids she had nursed back to life. Their petals were vibrant, glowing under the glass ceiling. They were survivors, just like her. But survival wasn't enough anymore. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Richard's face, smirking as he left her to die in the flames. Every morning, she awoke to the crushing reality that her child was gone. Rage and grief had twisted together inside her until they became something new: resolve. "I won't stay hidden forever," Sage whispered, her voice trembling with intensity. "He thinks he buried me, but I'm still here. And one day, he's going to see me again." Liam Archer stepped into the greenhouse, his gaze steady as he watched her. "You're stronger than you realize," he said softly. "But you need to be careful. Richard is dangerous. Clara is ruthless. If they discover you're alive before you're ready, they'll try again." Sage turned toward him, her eyes burning with determination. "Then I'll be ready. I won't just survive this time, I'll win." Liam studied her, torn between admiration and fear. "Justice takes patience. We'll gather evidence. We'll expose them the right way. You can't rush this." But Sage shook her head. "Evidence isn't enough. Richard is clever. He'll twist the story, paint himself as the victim. I need to do more than prove his guilt. I need to make him face me. I need him to know that I'm the one who came back." Her voice cracked on the last words, but she held her ground. That evening, she pulled out her journal, the one filled with letters to her lost child and vows to herself. For the first time, she wrote not about grief, but about strategy. Names, places, memories. Richard thought no one else knew. She still remembered the passwords he used, the people he trusted, the cracks in his empire. And now, with Liam's resources, she had tools to exploit them. Her first step was small but symbolic. Using Liam's discreet contacts, Sage sent an anonymous tip to a financial journalist. A leak about Richard Turner's mounting debts and questionable business practices. It wasn't enough to destroy him, but it planted a seed of suspicion in the public eye. When the article hit, Richard's face appeared on the news, his reputation bruised. Clara stood by his side in photos, but Sage could see it. The tension in his jaw, the cracks in his perfect mask. It was working. Liam found her watching the coverage late at night. "You did this, didn't you?" he asked, though his voice carried no judgment. Sage didn't deny it. "He started the war. I'm just answering it." Liam's eyes softened. "Just promise me one thing. Don't lose yourself to vengeance. You've already lost so much. Don't let him take the rest." Sage held his gaze, silent for a long moment. Finally she whispered, "I promise I'll never lose myself again. But Richard will lose everything." And as her first move rippled through Richard's world, Sage knew the real game had only just begun. The Archer estate was buzzing with quiet preparation. Staff moved through the halls carrying trays of silverware and rolls of red carpet. Outside, strings of lights were being strung across the gardens. To the world, It was simply another grand charity gala hosted by billionaire Liam Archer, known for his generosity and taste. But to Sage, it was something far greater. It was the first battlefield. From her room upstairs, Sage watched through the window as the estate transformed into a stage. Her fingers tightened around the railing. For weeks she had been healing, hiding, plotting. Now it was time to step out of the shadows, not as Sophia Turner, the betrayed wife, but as Sage Archer, a woman reborn. Liam entered quietly, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit. "The invitations have gone out," he said. "Richard and Clara will be there. They can't resist an opportunity to mingle with the powerful and polish their reputation." Sage's heart raced. Just hearing their names still made her stomach twist. "And they'll have no idea I'll be there," she whispered. "No," Liam confirmed. "To them, you don't exist anymore. You'll be the last person they expect to see." Hannah Brooks, who had become both counselor and confidant, approached Sage with a garment bag. "Then you need to look the part," she said gently. "Not just healed, not just surviving, but radiant. When you step into that room, you need to remind Richard what real power looks like." When Sage unzipped the bag, she gasped. Inside was a gown unlike any she had ever worn, sleek, midnight blue, adorned with delicate beading that shimmered like stars. It wasn't just clothing, it was armor. For the first time, Sage felt the stirrings of confidence rather than fear. That evening, as the final touches were placed, Sage stood before the mirror. Her reconstructed face looked back at her. Different, yes, but strong, beautiful, in a way she had never imagined. She slipped into the gown, straightened her posture, and whispered to her reflection, "Sophia Turner died in the fire. Tonight, Sage Archer rises." Downstairs, Liam offered his arm with a small, reassuring smile. "Ready?" Her lips curved into a steady, determined smile. "More than ready." The night of the gala arrived with elegance. Luxury cars lined the driveway. Cameras flashed as New York's elite walked the carpet. Journalists buzzed, capturing every glittering moment. And among the crowd, Richard Turner and Clara Evans arrived, dressed to perfection. Richard wore his most confident mask, shaking hands, laughing too loudly. Clara clung to his arm, her diamond necklace glittering as she smiled for the photographers. To them, the gala was an opportunity to bury suspicion, to remind everyone they were untouchable. But their confidence was about to crumble. Inside, Liam greeted the guests, his presence commanding, his reputation shielding the real purpose of the night. And then, as the music swelled and conversation filled the air, the doors at the top of the grand staircase opened. All eyes turned. Sage appeared, poised in her midnight gown, her presence magnetic. She descended the stairs slowly, gracefully, like a queen returning to her throne. And in that electrifying moment, Richard Turner's glass slipped from his hand, because the face he thought he'd burned into ashes had just walked back into his world. The room fell silent as Sage Archer reached the bottom of the staircase. Her midnight gown shimmered under the golden chandeliers. Her chin lifted high, every step measured and regal. Conversations hushed, forks paused midair, and the string quartet faltered as every eye locked on her. For Richard Turner, the sight was a nightmare made flesh. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. His face drained of color, his pulse hammered in his ears. He blinked once, twice, but the woman walking toward him did not vanish. Clara Evans grabbed his arm tightly, her nails digging into his sleeve. "Richard," she hissed, panic flickering in her eyes. "What is it?" "Who is she?" Richard's throat was dry, his words barely escaping. "It can't be. She's dead. She died." But Sage was very much alive. She smiled faintly, tilting her head, her gaze locking onto Richard's with unnerving calm. Her voice carried across the room, smooth yet laced with iron. "Mr. Turner, Ms. Evans, what a surprise to see you here." Clara forced a polite laugh, though her grip on Richard tightened. "And you are?" Sage extended her hand gracefully. "Sage Archer, I've heard so much about you both." The name meant nothing to Clara, but Richard felt as though the ground had been ripped out from beneath him. The eyes staring at him, different face, different features, but the eyes were the same. They were Sophia's eyes, burning with quiet fire. Throughout the room, whispers spread. Who was this stunning woman? Why did Richard Turner look as if he'd seen a ghost? Journalists in the crowd raised their cameras, eager to capture the tension. Liam Archer stepped in smoothly, his presence commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, Thank you for joining us tonight to support aviation safety. We're honored by all of your presence, and we are especially grateful to welcome Miss Sage Archer, whose story of survival is one of resilience and strength. The crowd erupted into polite applause. Richard's chest tightened. Survival? His hands shook as he wiped sweat from his forehead. Clara leaned closer, whispering furiously, "Pull yourself together, people are watching." But Richard couldn't shake the terror crawling through his veins. Sage's gaze never left his, and every second she held his stare, he felt exposed, stripped bare in front of the entire elite of New York. Sage lifted her champagne glass, her smile serene. "It's strange, isn't it, how life and death can turn on the smallest details. One day you think someone is gone forever, and then fate brings them right back." Her words cut through him like a knife. Clara tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. Something about the way Sage spoke, the way Richard was unraveling, it unsettled her deeply. The gala resumed with forced chatter, but the air was electric. Richard couldn't focus, couldn't breathe. He knew, deep in his bones, that Sage Archer was more than a guest. She was a threat. And as the night carried on, Richard realized with mounting dread that the woman standing before him was not just a stranger. She was the ghost of Sophia, and she was here for vengeance. The gala had shifted into a hum of music and polite chatter, but the undercurrent of tension was unmistakable. Cameras flashed, champagne glasses clinked, and New York's elite carried on as if nothing were wrong. But Richard Turner's nerves were unraveling thread by thread. His smile was forced, his laugh brittle, and his eyes never strayed far from Sage Archer. Sage, however, moved through the room like she owned it. She greeted politicians, shook hands with business moguls, and charmed journalists with her poise. Every step, every glance was calculated. She wasn't just a guest at this gala. She was building her stage. When the orchestra paused for the evening speeches, Liam Archer took the microphone. His deep voice echoed across the hall. "Tonight we gather not only to celebrate generosity, but to remember that safety in aviation is not just a privilege, it's a right. And no one knows the weight of that better than our honored guest." He gestured toward Sage. The spotlight found her. The crowd clapped, eager to hear the woman who had captured so much attention. Richard's stomach twisted. He whispered harshly to Clara, "We need to leave, now." Clara frowned. "Leave? Are you insane? Running out will only make you look guilty." Richard's lips tightened. "She's not who she says she is, I know it." But before he could act, Sage was already stepping onto the stage. The room quieted as she took the microphone, her midnight gown gleaming under the lights. She stood tall, her voice steady. "Good evening. My name is Sage Archer," she began. "I am standing here today because I survived what was meant to kill me." A murmur spread through the audience. Sage's eyes locked onto Richard. A plane crash. A fire so fierce it erased nearly every trace of the people on board. But fate spared me. Fate gave me another chance. Richard's pulse raced. He could feel sweat dripping down his back. Sage's tone sharpened. "When I woke in the wreckage, I thought I had been abandoned by chance. But the truth was darker. I wasn't abandoned by chance. I was betrayed by choice." Gasps rippled across the room. Journalists leaned forward, recording every word. Clara's nails dug into Richard's arm, her whisper frantic. "What is she doing?" Sage reached into her clutch and pulled out a small flash drive. "I have proof. Proof that the crash was no accident. Proof of payments made to the co-pilot. Proof of conversations recorded. Voices that planned my death." She handed the drive to the technician beside the stage. Within seconds, audio filled the hall. Richard's voice, clear as day. "After this trip, there won't be any more problems." The crowd erupted. Gasps, murmurs, disbelief. All eyes turned to Richard and Clara, who stood frozen like statues. Cameras flashed, capturing their panic. Richard's mask slipped entirely, rage and fear twisting his face. Clara tried to pull him toward the exit, but the path was already blocked by security. And as the evidence played for all to hear, Detective Omar Reyes stepped forward from the back of the room, badge in hand, ready to finish what Sage had started. The gala hall erupted into chaos. Guests gasped, reporters shouted, cameras flashed like lightning in a storm. On the giant screen, Richard Turner's voice kept looping from the recording. "After this trip, there won't be any more problems." Each repetition hit him like a hammer, pounding against the image he had worked so hard to build. Richard's face turned ashen. Clara Evans clutched his arm tightly, her nails digging into his skin. "Do something," she hissed through clenched teeth. But Richard could barely move, frozen under the crushing weight of 100 eyes. Then came the steady voice of Detective Omar Reyes, cutting through the noise. "Richard Turner, Clara Evans." His badge gleamed under the chandeliers as he strode forward, his expression unflinching. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and attempted homicide." The crowd gasped again, the scandal unfolding before their very eyes. Security moved quickly, flanking Richard and Clara. Journalists swarmed closer, microphones raised. Richard snapped out of his daze and shouted, "This is ridiculous. She's lying. She's not who she says she is." His finger trembled as he pointed at Sage Archer. "That's not Sophia. Sophia's dead." But Sage stepped forward calmly, her eyes piercing through his panic. "Yes, Sophia Turner died in those flames, but the woman you tried to destroy lived, and she's standing right here." Clara's face twisted with rage. "This is insane. You can't prove anything." Detective Reyes held up the flash drive. "We have the payments, the records, the recordings, and we have witnesses. You two thought the fire erased everything, but the truth always finds a way out." The cuffs clicked around Richard's wrists first. He thrashed violently, his once polished demeanor shattered. "Do you know who I am?" he bellowed. "I built this city. You can't touch me." Clara's composure cracked next. She tried to slip through the crowd, but security caught her by the arm. The diamond necklace she wore glittered mockingly under the lights as she screamed, "Let me go. I won't go down for this." Reporters swarmed, shouting questions. "Mr. Turner, did you try to kill your wife?" "Miss Evans, did you pay off the co-pilot?" "What do you have to say to the people watching right now?" Richard's voice broke into a desperate roar. "She was weak. She was holding me back. Everything I did was for us." His confession echoed across the hall, sealing his fate. Sage stood tall, watching as the man who betrayed her was dragged away in chains. There was no fear in her eyes anymore, only strength and a quiet fire of justice. The gala audience erupted into whispers and shocked conversations. Many guests looked at Sage with awe, others with pity, but all with respect. She had not only survived, she had unmasked monsters in the most public way possible. As Richard and Clara were forced through the doors by police, Richard turned one last time, his face twisted in fury. "This isn't over," he spat. "You hear me? This isn't." But the slam of the doors behind him silenced his threat, and Sage knew his empire of lies had finally collapsed. Months had passed since the night of the gala. The scandal had spread across every newspaper and television station in the country. Richard Turner and Clara Evans had been tried, exposed, and sentenced. Their faces, once fixtures of social ambition, were now infamous reminders of greed and betrayal. The world had moved on, but for Sage Archer, healing was still a daily journey. She walked through the gardens of Liam's estate one early spring morning, the orchids blooming brighter than ever. Their petals reminded her of herself, scarred, reshaped, but alive. Each new flower symbolized a promise that even after devastation, life could return. Liam joined her, carrying a tray with tea and a gentle smile. His presence had become her anchor. Where once she saw him as merely a savior, now she saw the man who had chosen to stand beside her through every dark night. Their bond had deepened, strengthened not by glamour or wealth, but by survival and truth. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Liam reached for her hand. "Sage," he said quietly, "you've been through fire and shadow, and you've come out stronger. But you don't have to walk forward alone anymore. Let me be your partner, not just in protection, but in life." Her eyes filled with tears. For so long, she had associated marriage with betrayal and loss. But Liam was different. He hadn't just saved her body, he had restored her will to live. With trembling joy, she whispered, "Yes." 1,000 times, yes. Their wedding was small, intimate, held on the cliffs overlooking the ocean. There were no cameras, no gossiping crowds, no spectacle, only sincerity. Sage wore a gown of soft ivory, simple yet radiant, her scars no longer something to hide, but part of the woman she had become. As Liam placed the ring on her finger, she felt not like she was erasing the past, but building something new. In time, Sage's prayers were answered in another way. She stood in the nursery of the Archer estate, sunlight streaming through lace curtains. In her arms, she cradled a newborn, her daughter, her second chance at motherhood. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "You're safe, little one. I'll never let anything take you from me." Liam watched from the doorway, his eyes filled with pride and tenderness. "She's perfect," he said softly, stepping in to wrap his arms around both of them. For Sage, it was the moment she thought would never come. After fire, betrayal, and death itself, she was holding new life. She was no longer Sophia Turner, the broken woman her husband had tried to erase. She was Sage Archer, wife, mother, survivor. Yet even in this peace, shadows lingered. She knew Richard was rotting in prison, stripped of wealth and freedom. Clara was locked away too, her beauty wasted behind bars. They were paying for their sins. But Sage also knew men like Richard never surrendered quietly. Somewhere, deep inside, his hatred still burned. And though Sage held her baby close with joy, a whisper of unease lingered, because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Prison had a way of stripping men bare. Gone were the suits, the penthouses, the champagne glasses. Richard Turner sat on the edge of a steel cot in his dim cell, the once powerful businessman reduced to a gaunt figure in an orange jumpsuit. The walls echoed with the clang of doors and the mutter of other inmates. His reflection in the scratched metal mirror looked nothing like the man who once believed he was untouchable. At first, he tried to carry himself with pride, barking orders, pretending he still had influence. But prison was not built for pride. Day after day, the reality sank in. He was forgotten. His wealth gone, his reputation destroyed, and the woman he betrayed had risen from the ashes stronger than ever. The worst punishment wasn't the bars, it was the silence. Alone in his cell, Richard replayed the gala over and over. The moment Sage Archer walked down the staircase, the moment his world shattered in front of everyone. The face he thought he had destroyed had returned, new and unshakable. It haunted him. At night, he woke in cold sweats, convinced she was standing at the foot of his bed, watching. Clara Evans fared no better. Once glamorous, she now paced the cracked prison yard, her eyes hollow. She blamed Richard for everything, screamed at him whenever their paths crossed in the cafeteria. The love they once flaunted turned to venom. They were no longer partners, they were enemies, rotting side by side. Meanwhile, life outside those walls blossomed. Sage Archer thrived. Her story became a beacon of resilience, though few knew the full truth. With Liam by her side and their daughter in her arms, she found healing in the small things: family dinners, laughter echoing through the halls, orchids blooming in her greenhouse. She had been broken, burned, betrayed, but she had rebuilt herself into something no fire could destroy. One afternoon, sitting in her garden, Sage looked down at her sleeping baby and whispered, "You'll never know the darkness I faced. But you'll grow up knowing your mother fought and won, and you'll never be afraid of the shadows, because you'll know light always returns." Back in his cell, Richard's health began to fail. Stress, bitterness, and neglect wore him down. When the coughs came, deep and ragged, no one paid attention. When fever burned through him, no one cared. The man who once believed the world owed him everything now faced his final days alone. In the end, Richard Turner died not with power, not with wealth, not even with love. He died with nothing, his name a curse, his legacy a warning. And far away, Sage Archer stood at the ocean's edge, the wind lifting her hair, her daughter nestled against her chest. She closed her eyes and let the salt air fill her lungs. This was not the end of her story. It was the beginning. Because from the ashes of betrayal, she had risen, not as the victim her enemies expected, but as the survivor, the mother, the woman who proved that nothing could extinguish her fire. So that's how the story comes to an end. But you're still here, aren't you? If you've stayed with me until now, it means something in this journey touched your heart in a way that words alone can't explain. Maybe it reminded you of your own struggles, your own betrayals, or the scars you carry quietly. Remember what the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said: "Fire tests gold, and adversity tests the brave." Pain doesn't define you. It shapes you into someone stronger. Like Sage, you too can rise from the ashes. If this story moved you, my friend, let it be a reminder. Healing is possible, justice is possible, and love after loss is possible. Now, if you feel this message matters, please like, share, and subscribe, so together we can keep telling stories that heal hearts and inspire courage.
The sterile white walls of the delivery room were closing in on Olivia Beaumont. A wave of pain, sharp and blinding, ripped through her, forcing a guttural cry from her lips. The monitor beside her beeped in a frantic, relentless rhythm, a soundtrack to her agony. But it was the silence that was truly deafening. The space beside her where her husband Nick's hand should have been was cold and empty. Her phone buzzed again on the side table, a cruel punctuation mark in her suffering. She knew who it was. She also knew he wouldn't answer. Because Nicholas Preston, the man who had promised her forever, was at that very moment choosing his forever, and it wasn't her. It wasn't even the 2 children she was fighting to bring into the world. Olivia and Nicholas Preston were to the outside world the golden couple of Boston's burgeoning tech scene. He was the charismatic founder of Preston Innovations, a man whose ambition was as sharp and polished as his designer suits. She was the brilliant architect who had set aside her own promising career to support her keen eye for design and structure, ironically helping him build a life she was about to be evicted from. Their brownstone on Beacon Hill was a testament to their success, all exposed brick minimalist art and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city that was supposed to be theirs for the taking. Olivia was 38 weeks pregnant with twins, the long-awaited completion of their perfect picture. The cracks, however, had been forming for months. They were hairline at first. Nick staying late for investor meetings that left him smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't hers, a specific expensive scent, something like Chanel No. 5, but sharper. The second phone, the one he called his work mobile, that he guarded with the ferocity of a dragon hoarding gold. The emotional distance that had crept between them, turning their sprawling bed into a desolate landscape. Olivia, ever the optimist, had blamed it on the stress of the twins' impending arrival and a new multi-million-dollar merger Nick was trying to close. "Just a little longer, Liv," he'd murmur, kissing her forehead. "Once this deal with Reed Global is done, it's just you and me and the babies. I promise." Reed Global. The name now tasted like ash in her mouth. Cassandra Reed, the company's vice president, was a woman carved from ice and ambition. Olivia had met her once at a company gala. She was stunning with raven hair and eyes that seemed to analyze and dismiss you in the same glance. She had shaken Olivia's hand, her manicured nails pressing just a little too hard, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "You're so brave," Cassandra had said, glancing at Olivia's swollen belly. "Giving up everything like this." It wasn't a compliment. The day the labor started, it was sudden and fierce. A Tuesday morning. Nick had just left, claiming an unavoidable emergency board meeting. As the first debilitating contraction seized her, Olivia had called him, her voice tight with pain. "Nick, it's time," she gasped. "The hospital, my water just broke." There was a pause on the other end of the line filled with an unnerving static. "Liv, I can't. Not right now. The Reed deal is happening today. This is the final signature. It's everything we've worked for." "Everything we've worked for is in this delivery room," she cried out, another contraction stealing her breath. "Nicholas, please, I need you." "I'll be there as soon as I can," he said, his voice distant, detached. "Just hold on." He hung up. Her sister Jenna had driven her to Massachusetts General Hospital, her face a mask of fury. For hours, Olivia endured the escalating agony, her hope dwindling with every unanswered text, every call that went straight to voicemail. The nurses exchanged pitying glances. At 3:17 p.m., with a final primal scream, Noah Preston was born. 2 minutes later, his sister Sophie followed. They were small, perfect, and utterly oblivious to the fact that their father had abandoned them at the threshold of their lives. As Olivia held her two babies, tears of joy and heartbreak mingling on her cheeks, her phone finally rang. It was Nick. "Liv?" His voice was strangely breathless. "They're here, Nick," she whispered, her voice raw. "A boy and a girl. They're beautiful." She waited for the elation, the apology, the sound of him rushing to the hospital. Instead, she heard a woman's voice in the background, low and possessive. Cassandra Reed's voice. "Is everything all right, darling?" A chilling silence fell. Then Nick's voice returned, stripped of all warmth. "Olivia, I'm sorry. Things have changed. Cassandra and we're flying to Geneva tonight. The deal is signed. This is my new life now." "Your new life?" Olivia's voice was barely a whisper. The room felt like it was tilting. "What about your children? What about us?" "I'll have my lawyer contact you about the arrangements," he said, his tone clinical, as if discussing a business transaction. "He'll be generous. It's better this way. For everyone." The line went dead. Olivia stared at the phone, the words echoing in the sterile room more painful than any contraction. He hadn't just left her in labor. He had erased her. He had traded his family for a contract and a life wrapped in cold, hard cash. She looked down at the two innocent faces nestled against her, Noah and Sophie, and a new feeling, fierce and terrifying, began to smolder in the ashes of her heart, a mother's resolve. She was alone, but they were not. She would protect them, no matter what it took. The world had taken her husband, but it would not take her strength. The days that followed were a blur of fluorescent lights, the scent of antiseptic, and the ceaseless, beautiful demands of two newborns. Jenna was her rock, but she had her own family, her own life. Soon Olivia was back in the Beacon Hill brownstone, a place that now felt less like a home and more like an opulent tomb, filled with the ghosts of broken promises. The generosity Nick had promised was a cruel joke. A single wire transfer appeared in her account, enough to cover the hospital bills and perhaps 2 months of expenses. Then silence. A week later, a letter arrived from a high-powered law firm, not Nick's usual corporate counsel, but a ruthless divorce firm known for gutting spouses. It outlined a paltry child support offer, contingent on her signing a sweeping NDA and relinquishing any and all claims to the assets of Preston Innovations. The brownstone, it turned out, was leased by the company. The cars, the art, the very furniture she sat on, all corporate assets. She and her 2 infants were to vacate the premises within 30 days. Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. Her own savings had been depleted during the high-risk pregnancy. She hadn't worked in 2 years. She had 2 babies entirely dependent on her, and she was about to be homeless. She spent her nights feeding Noah and Sophie the blue light of her phone, illuminating her tear-streaked face as she scrolled through job listings for architects, her portfolio woefully out of date. Her days were spent packing boxes, the sight of Nick's possessions, his golf clubs, his expensive watches, his framed photo with the governor, sending fresh waves of nausea through her. On the 29th day, with the house mostly empty, and her options nearly exhausted, the doorbell rang. Standing on her doorstep was a man she recognized instantly, a man who was the living embodiment of everything Nicholas Preston feared and loathed. Damien Devereaux. If Nick was the golden boy of Boston tech, Damien was its dark prince. A self-made billionaire, he ran Devereaux Enterprises, a sprawling conglomerate that was Preston Innovations' chief competitor. The rivalry between the 2 men was legendary, a battle fought in boardrooms, stock market floors, and scathing op-eds in the Wall Street Journal. Damien was older, harder a man who didn't play the game so much as rewrite the rules to ensure he always won. He was tall and imposing, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. His hair was dark, threaded with silver at the temples, and his eyes were a startling, intelligent gray that seemed to see right through her exhaustion and despair. "Mrs. Preston," he said, his voice a low baritone that held no warmth but commanded attention. "My apologies for the intrusion. May I have a moment of your time?" Stunned into silence, Olivia could only nod, stepping aside to let him in. He walked into the half-empty living room, his gaze sweeping over the packed boxes with an unreadable expression. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries," he began, turning to face her. "I am aware of your situation, of your husband's departure." He said the word with a subtle, cutting disdain. "And I'm aware of the insulting terms his lawyers have offered." Olivia bristled. "How could you possibly know that—" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Nicholas Preston likes to boast, and the people he boasts to often have loyalties that money can't buy, but information can. He believes he has won. He is celebrating in a penthouse in Geneva with Cassandra Reed, convinced he has shed all his liabilities." Damien's gray eyes locked onto hers. "He is mistaken. His greatest assets are in this room, and he was too foolish to realize it." Olivia clutched her robe tighter. "What do you want, Mr. Devereaux?" He took a step closer, his presence filling the cavernous room. "Your husband and I have been rivals for a decade. He has cost me contracts, poached my employees, and slandered my name. He values only one thing, victory, the image of success. I want to take that from him. I want to watch his entire world, the one he chose over you, burn to the ground." The sheer venom in his voice was shocking. "That has nothing to do with me," Olivia said, her voice trembling slightly. "On the contrary," Damien countered smoothly, "it has everything to do with you. You are his one weakness, the loose thread he left behind, the story of the wife he abandoned in labor for his business partner. It's a story that in the right hands could do irreparable damage to his reputation, but that's thinking too small." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "I am here to make you a proposition, Mrs. Preston. A business proposition of sorts." He laid out his plan with cold, calculated precision. He would provide for her and the children. Not just provide, but give them a life of unparalleled comfort and security. A beautiful home in a gated community in Brookline. A nanny, a housekeeper, the best of everything. He would fund a trust for the twins that would make them independently wealthy before they could even walk. He would finance her return to architecture, helping her start her own firm free from the shadow of her husband's name. Olivia stared at him, bewildered. Why would you do any of this? Because—" Damien said, his eyes glinting like steel. "In 5 years, when your children are old enough to understand, we will petition to have their surname legally changed to Devereaux. We will let the world believe they are mine. Nicholas will have his money and his mistress, but he will have lost his legacy. His name will die with him. There is no revenge more absolute than to have your enemy raise your children as his own, to have them love him while they forget you ever existed." The audacity of it was breathtaking. It was a devil's bargain, a plan born of pure, unadulterated hatred for Nick. But as Olivia looked at the boxes surrounding her, as she thought of the looming deadline and the 2 innocent lives sleeping in the next room, desperation warred with her pride. This wasn't about love or affection. It was a cold, strategic alliance. He would use her and her children as the ultimate weapon in his war against Nick. And in return, she and her children would get a future. Safety. A life. "I need to think," she stammered. "There's no time," Damien said, his tone final. His lawyers are filing for your eviction tomorrow at 9 a.m. My offer stands until then." He placed a simple, elegant business card on the mantelpiece. "A car will be waiting for you outside at 8 a.m. If you are in it, I will have my answer. If not, I wish you the best of luck, Mrs. Preston." He turned and walked out, leaving Olivia alone in the echoing silence of her ruined life. She looked at the card, then in the direction of the nursery where her babies slept. Damien Devereaux was offering her a gilded cage, a life built on a lie, all for the sake of a billionaire's vengeance. But a gilded cage was still a cage that kept the wolves at bay. As the first light of dawn broke over Boston, Olivia Beaumont made her choice. She would not be a victim. She would be a survivor. And if survival meant making a deal with her husband's devil, then she would learn to dance in the flames. The car that arrived at 8 a.m. was a black, impossibly sleek sedan with tinted windows. The driver, a stoic man named Arthur, who would become a quiet fixture in their lives, loaded her few remaining personal boxes and the precious cargo of 2 infant car seats without a word. As they pulled away from the Beacon Hill brownstone, Olivia didn't look back. The life Damien Devereaux provided was beyond anything she could have imagined. Their new home in Brookline wasn't just a house. It was an estate. A sprawling stone manor set behind a formidable iron gate surrounded by acres of manicured lawns and ancient oak trees. It was private, secure, and beautiful. Inside, it was a blank canvas. "Decorate it as you see fit," Damien had told her during their first formal meeting in his downtown office, a place of steel and glass that overlooked the entire city. "This is your home, the children's home." He was true to his word in every respect. A kind, competent nanny named Maria was hired. A trust fund was established in the names of Noah and Sophie Beaumont, managed by the most respected firm in Boston, and a corner office in a chic downtown building was leased for Beaumont Design, with a generous operating budget and a small team of staff. The arrangement was peculiar. Damien was an ever-present but distant figure. He was not trying to be a father, not yet. He was the benefactor, the architect of their new reality. He would visit the house twice a week, always in the evening. He wouldn't hold the babies, but he would stand by their cribs for long moments, his expression unreadable. He spoke to Olivia with a detached politeness, inquiring about the business, the house, the children's health. It was an alliance, not a friendship. Olivia, in turn, threw herself into her work and her children. Beaumont Design flourished. Her talent, sharpened by her time away, was undeniable. She designed sleek, modern homes for Boston's elite, her name quickly becoming synonymous with innovative elegance. She was no longer Olivia Preston, the abandoned wife. She was Olivia Beaumont, a force in her own right. The years began to melt away. Noah grew into a serious, inquisitive boy with his father's dark hair, but a quiet intensity that was all his own. He was fascinated by how things worked, disassembling toys and gadgets with a focus that was startling in a 5-year-old. Sophie was his opposite, a whirlwind of laughter and creativity with Olivia's warm eyes and a wild mane of auburn curls. She painted on any surface she could find, her tiny fingers constantly smudged with color. Damien's role in their lives slowly, almost imperceptibly shifted. The detached benefactor became a quiet presence. He started having dinner with them on his visiting nights. He would listen as Sophie chattered about her day, and he'd sit on the floor with Noah, patiently helping him build complex Lego structures that Olivia couldn't begin to comprehend. They never called him Dad. He never asked them to. To them, he was Damien. He was the man who was always there. He was the one who taught Noah how to fly a kite on the vast lawn, whose deep voice was the one they heard reading them bedtime stories on Tuesday and Thursday nights. He attended parent-teacher conferences and preschool recitals, a formidable figure in a sea of suburban parents. The world as he had planned began to draw its own conclusions. Whispers followed them, the reclusive billionaire and his beautiful family. Olivia and Damien never discussed the terms of their original agreement. It was an unspoken foundation beneath their strange, carefully constructed life. She found herself relying on his quiet strength, his unwavering stability. Their conversations evolved from polite inquiries to genuine discussions about business politics, and most surprisingly, their children. She saw glimpses of a man beneath the corporate armor, a dry wit, a surprising patience, a fierce protectiveness that was directed entirely at Noah and Sophie. Meanwhile, news of Nicholas Preston and Cassandra Reed would occasionally filter through financial journals or glossy gossip magazines. They were the ultimate power couple, conquering Europe from their base in Geneva. Photos showed them on yachts in Monaco, at ski resorts in Gstaad, the very picture of opulent success. Nick looked handsome, powerful, and happy. Olivia would look at the photos, a hollow ache in her chest, and then look at her children safe and thriving, and know she had made the right choice. The first crack in Nick's perfect world appeared 6 years after he left. It was a small article buried in the back of the Financial Times. Preston Innovations faces scrutiny over accounting practices. A few months later, a larger story. Key investors pull funding amid fraud allegations. Damien mentioned it casually over dinner one night. It seems your ex-husband's creative ambition extended to his balance sheets. He said his tone neutral, but Olivia saw a flicker of grim satisfaction in his eyes. That night, for the first time in 6 years, Olivia's personal phone rang with an unknown international number. She stared at it, her heart pounding. She let it go to voicemail. The message was 3 words spoken in a voice she barely recognized, a voice frayed with desperation and disbelief. "Olivia, it's me." She deleted it without a second thought. But she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that the ghost she had buried 6 years ago was about to come clawing his way back. The world Damien had built for them was strong, but she was about to find out if it was strong enough to withstand the man who had tried to destroy her first. In Geneva, the penthouse that overlooked the lake had begun to feel less like a palace and more like a prison. The initial euphoria of their victory, the stolen company, the limitless wealth, the brazen escape, had long since curdled into a routine of bitter resentment. Nicholas Preston had discovered a terrible truth: the life he had coveted was hollow. Cassandra Reed was not a partner. She was a conqueror. She had wanted his company, not his heart. Their conversations were no longer about shared dreams, but about market shares and expense reports. The passion that had once seemed so intoxicating was now a demanding, exhausting performance. She was beautiful, brilliant, and utterly devoid of the warmth and unconditional support Olivia had given him so freely. He also discovered that running a global corporation built on a foundation of risky, borderline fraudulent deals was a house of cards in a hurricane. The aggressive accounting that had fueled their rapid expansion was now a liability. Investigators from the SEC and their European counterparts were circling like sharks. The creative deals he'd been so proud of were being unraveled one by one. The final blow came not from a regulator, but from within. Cassandra, ever the pragmatist, saw the writing on the wall. One morning, Nick woke up to find her side of the bed empty. A note on the nightstand informed him that she had accepted a severance package from the board, a package that gave her a significant portion of the company's remaining liquid assets in exchange for her resignation and, more importantly, her cooperation with the authorities. She had sold him out to save herself. Within a month, Preston Innovations was forced into bankruptcy. Nicholas Preston, the wunderkind of Boston Tech, was ruined. His assets were frozen, his reputation shattered. He was left with a mountain of legal bills and a small protected trust fund his father had set up for him years ago, enough to live on, but a pittance compared to the empire he had built and lost. He was adrift, humiliated and alone in a foreign city. The sycophants and fair-weather friends who had orbited his wealth vanished overnight. In the crushing silence of his new, much smaller apartment, his thoughts invariably turned back to Boston, to the life he had so carelessly discarded. He started searching online. He found articles about Beaumont Design, stunned by Olivia's success. He saw photos of her at charity events, poised and elegant, often with Damien Devereaux standing discreetly nearby. Then he found the school newsletters, the local society pages, photos of a Little League game, a school play. And there they were, his children. Noah with his serious eyes holding a science fair trophy, Sophie with her riot of curls covered in paint and grinning proudly next to an easel. They were happy. They were healthy. And in every picture, Damien Devereaux was there looking at them with a quiet pride that twisted a knife in Nick's gut. Regret, an emotion he had long suppressed, consumed him. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had committed an act of profound, life-altering stupidity. He had thrown away real gold for glittering dust. He told himself it was the pressure, Cassandra's manipulation, his own ambition. But deep down, he knew the truth. It was a failure of character, a moral bankruptcy that had preceded the financial one. Fueled by a cocktail of desperation, remorse, and a burning envy for what Damien Devereaux had, he made a decision. He wasn't just going to apologize. He was going to get his family back. He booked a one-way ticket to Boston, clinging to a delusional hope that the man they once knew was still someone they could love. He convinced himself that Olivia, his sweet, forgiving Liv, would see his remorse and welcome him home. He had forgotten the woman he had abandoned, but he was about to meet the woman he had created. The first sighting was subtle. A car parked too long down the street from the estate. A glimpse of a man in a coffee shop near Olivia's office, who looked hauntingly familiar. Olivia dismissed it as paranoia, the lingering trauma of the past. Then came the phone calls, blocked numbers hang-ups as soon as she answered. An email from an anonymous account with a single attachment, a photo of him and Olivia on their wedding day with the subject line, "Remember us." The siege had begun. The direct confrontation happened on a crisp autumn afternoon. Olivia was picking the twins up from their private school in Chestnut Hill. As Noah and Sophie ran towards her, their backpacks bouncing, a figure stepped out from behind a large oak tree. It was Nicholas. He looked diminished. The bespoke suits were gone, replaced by a rumpled jacket and jeans. The arrogant swagger had been replaced by a nervous energy. But the face was the same, the face that had once been her entire world. "Liv," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Olivia's blood ran cold. She instinctively pushed Noah and Sophie behind her, her body forming a protective shield. "What are you doing here, Nick?" "I had to see them," he pleaded, his eyes fixated on the children peeking out from behind her legs. They're so big. They look perfect. Sophie hid her face in Olivia's coat, but Noah stared at the strange man with a child's unfiltered curiosity. "Mommy, who is that?" The question struck Olivia with the force of a physical blow. To them, this man was a stranger. "He's someone I used to know," she said, her voice steely. "You are not welcome here, Nick. You need to leave. Now." "Please, Liv, just let me talk to them. Let me explain," he begged, taking a step forward. "I made a terrible mistake. I've lost everything. I realize now that you and they are all that ever mattered." The audacity of his self-pity was staggering. "You don't get to do this," she hissed, her voice low and furious. "You don't get to abandon them to not exist for 6 years and then show up at their school expecting a welcome party. They have a life here, a happy, stable life that has nothing to do with you." "With him," Nick spat, his desperation turning to anger as a black sedan pulled up to the curb. Arthur was behind the wheel. "You replaced me with Damien Devereaux, my worst enemy. You let him raise my children." "He didn't leave them." Olivia shot back the words like bullets. "He was there for every scraped knee, every nightmare, every birthday. He's more of a father to them than you could ever dream of being. Now get away from us." She bundled the shaken twins into the car and drove away, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. But the confrontation was only the beginning. Nick, having failed in his appeal to emotion, turned to the law. A week later, Olivia was served with a petition for parental rights. His lawyer, a smarmy opportunist named Peterson, argued that Nicholas Preston, a reformed and remorseful man, had been unjustly kept from his biological children and was seeking court-mandated visitation. The battle turned ugly. Nick's legal team painted Olivia as a bitter woman who had fallen into the clutches of a manipulative billionaire using her children as pawns in a corporate war. They dredged up details of Damien's ruthless business reputation to portray him as an unfit guardian. Damien's response was swift and brutal. His legal team, the best in the country, was a phalanx of impenetrable resolve. They countersued for sole legal and physical custody and filed a restraining order against Nick. They compiled a mountain of evidence: the abandonment at the hospital, the 6 years of complete silence and non-support, Nick's financial ruin, and the fraud allegations that surrounded it. The process was a nightmare for Olivia. It forced her to relive the worst moments of her life in depositions. It created a cloud of uncertainty that began to affect the children. Noah grew quieter, more withdrawn. Sophie started having nightmares. One evening, after a particularly grueling day with the lawyers, Olivia found Damien in his study. "He's going to hurt them," she said, her voice breaking. "This fight, this poison, it's going to ruin the peace we've built." Damien stood up from his desk and walked over to her. For the first time, he dropped the formal barrier that had always existed between them. He placed his hands on her shoulders, his gray eyes searching hers. "He will not lay a hand on them, Olivia. He will not win," Damien said with a chilling certainty. "I have held one card back in this game. It is a cruel one, and I had hoped never to play it. But he has left me no choice. It's time he understood the true nature of the enmity between us. It was never just business." Olivia looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to tell you a story. Olivia," he said, his voice low and heavy with a grief she had never heard before. "About a man named Robert Jensen, and about the night my own world ended long before I ever met you." The study was silent, except for the low crackle of the fire Damien had lit in the hearth. The shadows danced on the walls lined with books on finance, history, and philosophy. It was a room that spoke of power and intellect, but tonight it felt like a confessional. 8 years ago, Damien began, his voice devoid of its usual commanding tone, now hollowed out by memory. I was married. Her name was Isabel. She was a violinist with the Boston Symphony. She was everything. He paused, looking into the flames, as if seeing a ghost. We had a son, Thomas. He was 4 years old. He had his mother's smile and my stubbornness. Olivia sat down, her own troubles momentarily forgotten, captivated by this unexpected window into Damien's soul. She had never once considered his life before he entered hers. He had always seemed so complete, so self-contained. We were driving back from my parents' house in Connecticut one night. Damien continued, his jaw tight. It was late, raining. Thomas was asleep in his car seat. A car came out of nowhere, speeding, swerving all over the road. It hit us head on. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with unspoken tragedy. I woke up in the hospital. I had a broken leg, 3 fractured ribs, a severe concussion. But I was alive. Isabel and Thomas, they weren't so lucky. They died at the scene. Olivia let out a soft gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh, Damien, I'm so sorry. I never knew. He gave a slight dismissive shake of his head, as if his grief were an old coat he was long used to wearing. The driver of the other car was drunk. His blood alcohol level was more than twice the legal limit. His name was Robert Jensen. He was a senior executive at a rapidly expanding tech firm, a rising star. Damien finally turned from the fire, and his gray eyes, usually so cool and analytical, were burning with an intensity that startled her. The firm was Preston Innovations. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. Nick's company. Jensen was Nick's right-hand man. Damien explained, his voice turning to ice. They were on the verge of closing a massive deal, the one that put them on the map. A conviction for vehicular manslaughter would have scuttled the whole thing. The investors would have pulled out. The scandal would have destroyed them. So Nicholas Preston, ever the pragmatist, orchestrated a cover-up. He hired the best, most ruthless lawyers in the city. They buried evidence. They intimidated witnesses. They painted me as the one who was speeding, who crossed the center line. They turned Robert Jensen, a drunk who killed a woman and a child, into the victim. In the end, Jensen got off with a slap on the wrist. 6 months probation for reckless driving. Nick's deal went through. He celebrated his victory while I was burying my family. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place in Olivia's mind, forming a picture of unimaginable cruelty. Damien's rivalry with Nick wasn't about market share or corporate ego. It was a cold, patient, all-consuming quest for justice, or perhaps for vengeance. I tried to fight it, Damien said, his voice low, but their lies were airtight. I had lost my family, and the man responsible was protected by the empire your husband was building. So I changed tactics. I couldn't beat him in court, so I decided to beat him in the world he valued most. I focused all my energy on Devereaux Enterprises with the singular goal of crushing him. Every deal I stole, every employee I poached, it was all for Isabel and Thomas. He looked at Olivia, and for the first time she understood the full depth of the man standing before her. She understood the offer he had made her 6 years ago, not as a cynical act of revenge, but as something far more complex. When I heard what he did to you, Damien said softly, leaving you in that hospital, abandoning his own children on the day they were born, I saw him doing it all over again, sacrificing family decency, humanity, all for a deal, for a victory. I saw my chance not just to ruin him, but to build something good from the wreckage he leaves in his wake. He took a step closer to her. This was never just about using you as a weapon, Olivia. It was about protecting Noah and Sophie from a man who is fundamentally hollow. A man who would cover up the death of a child to close a deal. That is the card I have left to play. That is the truth we will present to the court. And that is the man who is trying to claim parental rights to your children." Olivia was speechless. The man she had married, the father of her children, was not just a cheat and a coward. He was a monster cloaked in a charismatic smile. The last vestiges of any sympathy she might have held for him evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. "Do it," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Play the card. End this." Damien nodded slowly. The war for the children's future was about to enter its final, devastating stage. The revelation of the Robert Jensen case was a bombshell dropped in the middle of the custody hearing. Damien's lawyers presented the evidence with chilling precision: old police reports, buried witness statements they had spent years unearthing, financial records showing payments from Preston Innovations to key individuals involved in the original investigation. They weren't just accusing Nick of moral bankruptcy. They were building a case for obstruction of justice. Nick, sitting beside his lawyer, turned a ghastly shade of pale. He looked across the courtroom at Damien, and for the first time he seemed to understand the true nature of the force that had been working against him for nearly a decade. This wasn't a business rival. This was a ghost, a specter of vengeance he had unknowingly created years ago. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Maria Lopez, listened to the evidence with a deepening frown. The custody case was rapidly turning into an inquiry into a potential criminal conspiracy. Nick's lawyer Peterson could see the case and his payday disintegrating before his eyes. Faced with public ruin and possible criminal charges, Nick folded. Peterson requested a recess, and within the hour, a deal was reached. Nicholas Preston would withdraw his petition for parental rights. He would terminate all claims to Noah and Sophie forever. In return, Damien Devereaux would not pursue criminal charges for the cover-up. It was a checkmate. The final confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom, but in the sterile hallway outside. Nick, looking utterly broken, waited for Olivia and Damien to emerge. "Was it all for this?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper directed at Damien. "All of it. The last 8 years you built an empire just to destroy me." "I built an empire in spite of what you did," Damien corrected him, his voice cold as a winter grave. "Destroying you was just a potential dividend." Nick then turned his desperate gaze to Olivia. "Liv, I didn't know about his family. The Jensen thing. It was just business. A problem to be managed. I swear." Olivia looked at the man she had once loved, the father of her children, and felt nothing but a profound, sorrowful pity. "It was never just business, Nick. That's what you've never understood. It was a woman and a child. It was a wife in labor. It was your son and your daughter. You see people as assets or liabilities, problems to be managed. You don't see the humanity. That's why you lost. Not just today. You lost 6 years ago in that hospital." He searched her face for a flicker of the old affection, a spark of forgiveness, but he found none. There was nothing left to burn. Defeated, he simply nodded and walked away, a ghost disappearing down the long courthouse corridor, exiting their lives as completely as he had the day the twins were born. That evening, the house on the hill was quiet. The legal storm had passed. Olivia was tucking Sophie into bed, who had a question in her sleepy eyes. "Mommy," she whispered, "is that man going to come back?" "No, sweetie," Olivia said, stroking her hair. "He's gone. You're safe." Later, she found Damien on the large stone terrace overlooking the gardens, staring up at the night sky. For a long time, they stood in a comfortable silence, the years of their strange arrangement settling around them, no longer a contract, but a life. "Damien," Olivia said softly. "Thank you. For everything." He turned to her, the moonlight softening the hard lines of his face. "There's nothing to thank me for. Protecting them, protecting you. It's the most important work I've ever done. It's the first thing in a long time that has made me feel whole." In that moment, the unspoken truth that had been growing between them for years finally surfaced. This was not an alliance anymore. It wasn't about revenge or protection. It had, against all odds, become a family. A broken man and a betrayed woman had found a way to piece together their shattered lives and build something new, something stronger. A few weeks later, Olivia was in her office when Noah came in holding a piece of paper. It was a drawing for a school project titled My Family. On it were 4 stick figures: a woman with auburn hair labeled Mommy, a little girl with a splash of yellow for hair labeled Sophie, a little boy labeled Me, and a tall figure beside him, a man with dark hair. Underneath the tall figure in Noah's careful childish print was the word Dad. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. She looked at her son, who was watching her with his serious, knowing gaze. It wasn't a legal petition or a public declaration. It was something far more powerful. It was a choice. A name given not by birth or by law, but by love. Their new beginning wasn't on the horizon anymore. They were already living in it, a year past, serene and blessedly uneventful. The echoes of the courtroom battle faded, replaced by the comfortable rhythms of family life. The estate in Brookline, once a strategic sanctuary, was now simply home. The arrangement born from vengeance and desperation had blossomed into something genuine and deeply loving. Olivia and Damien were no longer allies in a war against Nicholas Preston. They were partners in everything, their lives woven together by shared breakfasts, school runs, and the quiet understanding that passed between them over the heads of the children. The twins, now 7, had fully settled into the security of their world. The bad man, as Sophie had once called Nick, was a forgotten nightmare. Their lives were delineated by soccer practice, art classes, and the unwavering presence of 2 parents. Damien had seamlessly transitioned from a benefactor to a father in every sense of the word. He was the one who checked for monsters under the bed, who patiently explained Noah's complex science questions, and whose shoulders were the preferred viewing platform at parades. The final unspoken piece of their original bargain, the changing of the twins' surname, had never been mentioned. The revenge that had once fueled Damien seemed to have been replaced by a simple, profound desire for his family's happiness. To force the issue now would feel like referencing a painful history they had all worked so hard to overcome. The catalyst for change came, as it often did, from the children. Noah came home from school one afternoon looking unusually pensive, a large sheet of paper clutched in his hand. He found Damien in the library reviewing financial reports. "Damien," Noah said, his voice small. "Can you help me with my homework?" "Of course," Damien said, pushing the papers aside and giving Noah his full attention. "What is it?" Noah unrolled the sheet of paper. It was a template for a family tree with boxes branching out from a central space labeled Me. "We have to fill in our family," Noah explained, pointing to the boxes. "This is Mommy and this is Sophie, and my teacher said to put my father here." He looked up at Damien, his serious eyes searching. "But my last name is Beaumont, and Mommy's is Beaumont. What name do I write for my father?" Damien's breath caught in his throat. Here it was, the culmination of a 9-year journey posed as a simple homework question by a 7-year-old boy. The choice was not his to make, or even Olivia's. It was Noah's. Kneeling down to be at eye level with the boy, Damien's voice was gentle. A father is the person who loves you, who takes care of you, and who promises to always be there for you. The name is less important than the person. You can write whatever name you feel belongs there. Noah considered this with his typical gravity. He picked up a green crayon, and in the box reserved for his father, he carefully wrote the name Damien. He didn't write a last name at all, as if in his mind the name itself was enough. Then he looked at Damien and asked, "Is it okay if I borrow your last name too? Devereaux is a good name for a scientist." A wave of emotion so powerful it almost staggered him washed over Damien. The cold revenge he had plotted for years seemed like a pale and insignificant thing compared to this simple, heartfelt request. This wasn't about erasing Nicholas Preston. It was about being chosen. That evening, after the children were asleep, Damien found Olivia on the terrace. He held the family tree in his hand. He didn't need to explain. She saw it in his eyes. "It seems the children are ahead of us," she said, her voice soft. "I loved Isabel." Damien said the admission raw and honest in the quiet of the night. "Losing her and Thomas, it hollowed me out. I thought all I had left was the anger. I never believed I would have this again. A home, a family, love." He turned to face her, fully taking both of her hands in his. "I don't want to be your benefactor or your partner in our old arrangement anymore, Olivia. I want to be your husband. And I want to be their father, not just in practice, but legally, and in my heart for the rest of my life." He didn't get down on one knee. It wasn't a grand theatrical proposal. It was a quiet, solemn promise offered between two people who had already built a life together. Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she smiled. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course, yes." They decided against a large wedding. Their union wasn't for public consumption. They held a small ceremony in the garden of their home, surrounded by a handful of close friends and family. Noah was the ring bearer, and Sophie was the flower girl, gleefully tossing petals all over the lawn. When the judge officiating the ceremony asked for the rings, Damien presented Olivia with a simple, elegant platinum band. Olivia in turn handed the judge not a ring, but a set of documents. They were adoption papers. In front of their loved ones, Damien legally adopted Noah and Sophie, and the judge pronounced them officially and forever the Devereaux family. Their last name was no longer a weapon to be used against a vanquished enemy. It was a banner of unity, a symbol of a family forged not by blood, but by choice, resilience, and an extraordinary love. As Damien, Olivia, Noah, and Sophie stood together, they were a testament to the fact that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings are born from the most painful of endings. The ghost of Nicholas Preston was well and truly gone, not because he had been destroyed, but because he had been rendered utterly irrelevant by the simple, powerful, and unshakable force of a happy family. In the end, this isn't just a story about a husband's shocking betrayal or a billionaire's calculated revenge. It's a testament to the incredible resilience of a mother's love and the unexpected ways a new family can be forged in the fires of adversity. Olivia Beaumont didn't just survive. She rebuilt her life from the ashes, creating a world of safety and love for her children with the most unlikely of allies. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the family we choose is stronger and more real than the one we are born into. What would you have done in Olivia's situation? Could you have accepted help from your husband's greatest enemy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of heartbreak, resilience, and ultimate triumph moved you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who loves a powerful real-life drama, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories. Thank you for listening.